What we do is we like to do like on the.
We've got 25 million followers, so yeah.
It's like an ongoing joke. It's like the fact that you're doing a podcast is good enough. It doesn't matter if anybody listens to it.
You like to hear yourself talk, right?
Yeah, no, I definitely don't. It's weird.
How do you distribute it? Through?
We distribute it through YouTube, Spotify, and Apple. And then there's this application that we use called Captivate. So you basically like load the information into Captivate, and then that one like pushes it out to the different podcast mediums.
What about the video? You just put that on like YouTube?
Only goes on YouTube. So yeah, so we're here. We're talking with Mike Brown from Cape Fear Commercial and Cape Fear Development and a couple other.
Yeah, absolutely. Good to be here.
Thanks for coming on, Mike. Thanks for coming on. What we'd like to talk about today is, really, talk about development in the greater Wilmington area, talk about Project Grace. And I think what would be a good start is if you can kind of explain, what Cape Fear Commercial does and what your role is within the organization and kind of how you've got to that, that spot.
And a little bit of background, I guess.
Absolutely.
So I was raised in Wilmington, North Carolina. I'm a Wilmington native.
Yep.
Graduated high school in 2000. Went to school in Chapel Hill, University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill.
Who would have guessed
there you go.
With your shit with the snakes?
Developed an interest kind of in development through a friend of mine's father who was working on a project with Crescent Resources down in Bluffton, South Carolina, called Palmetto Bluff. At the time, it was just a 23,000 acre tract. And Crescent Resources, which was owned by Duke Energy at the time, Tommy Basin was the guy's name. He had done a fair amount of projects down there, one of which was Spring Island, which is a really, just a cool project. It's like low impact, and the low country of South Carolina is so pretty. So he'd done that, and he'd gone on board with Palmetto Bluff, and they were going to take this 23,000 acre tract, which was an old timber tract, having a historic hunting lodge on it, and they were going to kind of redevelop it into something really special that was low impact, et cetera. So I thought that was like really exciting. After my junior year in school, I came back and did an internship. Cape Fear Commercial had just been formed in 2001, and did an internship. That's how I met Brian and Ben, who are the two founders. Ended up going back, finished my senior year, and I got my first job actually with Pulte Homes, which is one of the largest publicly traded home builders in the country. And so that was in Raleigh, North Carolina. So I worked for them from 04 to 08 and started in sales, actually on-site sales, selling houses in one of their communities, and then matriculated over to their development side. So they were doing 700-800 homes a year. So they've got this huge pipeline of developments to kind of feed the construction engine. But great company, great training, great people, really enjoyed it. And then got an opportunity in 08 to come back and work with Cape Fear Commercial on the Autumn Hall project. So when I came back, I was working for Autumn Hall exclusively, did that for a year or two, and then kind of broadened my horizons and started doing some more work at Cape Fear Commercial outside of just Autumn Hall. I'm still involved in Autumn Hall and Cape Fear Commercial, still kind of the lead development manager of Autumn Hall. So a little bit on Cape Fear Commercial, started in 2001 by Ben Wells and Brian Eckel. There are kind of three verticals for the business. One's brokerage, helping buyers and sellers of commercial real estate, tenants and landlords in terms of leasing, and then some industrial, et cetera. Then the second component is property management, third-party property management. So we manage about 3.5 million square feet of shopping centers, office buildings, industrial parks for third-party owners, meaning we don't own that real estate. So if you owned a shopping center and you're here working on your business day in, day out, we would manage it for you and take care of the day-to-day. And then the third vertical was development services. So we would help, let's say you wanted to develop this building like you just did, and you wanted to hire somebody to manage it, we would do that on your behalf. And then Cape Fear Commercial, about 5 or 6 years ago, we created our own development arm where we wanted to actually develop property that we would have ownership in. And so we've really been focused, honoring our clients with Cape Fear Commercial on the brokerage and property management side. We don't want to get into speculative office development or commercial development of retail shopping centers, for instance, because you'd be competing with your clients. But we will do some office and retail development if it's for a specific end user, like Publix and Walgreens. We've developed for them. but we're not doing a lot of speculative office or commercial building.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll also do on the development side, we'll do, the Publix, the Walgreens, that type of thing. But we'll also do a lot of multifamily. We've got into that. That's been a good, vertical over the last few years. We've done one self-storage project. We've done 2 public-private partnerships with New Hampshire County, which have been great experiences. And we've done some other fee development, helping people manage different real estate solutions. So that's a little bit on Cape for commercial. We kind of do a little bit of everything.
Yeah. Well, you guys are definitely one of the the bigger names in town, and I see the signs and and the involvement in the community. What do you think is one of some of the reasons why you guys have been able to build such a big brand and build such a presence within the community?
Well, I think we've got our competitors in the market do a great job as well. And we're fortunate to have very good competitors and folks that I love working with, folks at Mosswork and Matthews and Coldwell Banker, et cetera. But kind of one of the things I think has been key for us is, getting the right people in the door and working for you. Obviously, have the right team, but also I think we're very good. We have an entrepreneurial or kind of a creative mindset, and where we try to. There's a complex problem. I think we're good at coming together and collaborating internally. And externally with other partners and trying to find creative solutions. So I think we've been successful in doing that and built a team around doing that, with brokers in the office, property management staff who are very familiar with the operating metrics for a successful investment. And then we've got some construction folks in the office, and we've got some project managers in the office who've been in construction and development. And then we've got a financial analyst staff. So we've kind of got a lot of the key components there. No matter what the issue might be, there's somebody in the office that has some expertise. So we also work in teams. We're not very siloed. If you hire me and you've got a specific issue that maybe that some of my expertise might weigh into, but Lindsay Hess in the office might have some expertise that would add to that. I would go to Lindsay and we would work for you together as a team versus me trying to control the business exclusively.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like at the core, it's you guys are a service business, right?
Right.
Like you're providing, you're building stuff as well, but at the core, it's a service business.
It's just a service business, right? It's like solving problems, right?
Exactly.
Like somebody's got a challenge. I need to sell a building, or I need to buy a building. That might be a challenge.
Yeah.
Or maybe they have an issue. I mean, during the downturn, during the Great Recession, we did a lot of work with banks, not just selling. Banks had taken back a lot of these assets that had gone, defunct, and been given back to them by their borrowers. So it wasn't just, we wanted to get those listings and try to sell them. We did some of that, but really a lot of where we add value there was these banks had an issue. They might have inherited a halfway complete subdivision, and the borrower who gave it back to them wasn't, they were taking back its assets. So he or she might not have been super inclined to, give them the benefit of all his files and come and work for him for a month during the transition. Obviously,
Right,
he was out the door.
Yeah.
So we would come in and on the front end try to figure out, do a lot of research up front before we even tried to sell it. Let's figure out what you have. Let's figure out where all the permits are. Let's figure out where the plans are. Let's figure out what work's been done, what work needs to be done. Let's come up with a budget for that. Kind of organize the file, if you will, and organize the property, and then come up with a strategy from there to figure out how we're going to solve the bank's problem. In this case, they want to sell the asset and recoup some of their losses. So, some of that was, a lot of discussions with HOAs and trying to get those organized, or discussions with contractors trying to get some work done before it was actually a marketable asset, cleaning it up. And then on the back end, we'd help get it sold. So kind of a stem to stern type of real estate solution. But it's all just advisory services and helping people connect to the dots and reach their goals.
How many, across, all the, verticals or different parts of the organization, how many folks would you say that you guys have on staff, rough?
Originally the company was small, and I could answer that right off the top of my head. We've probably got a little over 30 employees now, and I would say we've got 10 brokers in the office. On the development side, we have four folks working just kind of mostly exclusively in development. We have We do have Cape Fear Construction now. We are doing some construction, self-performing some of our construction. We have 2 or 3 construction folks on the Cape Fear Construction side, and then on the property management side, which is a big piece of our business. That's probably half of our office. There's probably, I think we got 10 to 15 people in property management. So all told, I don't know what that would add up to, but 30, 35 people.
Yeah, no, it's a healthy organization. I mean, it looks like you guys are able to accomplish a lot with pretty lean staff. I guess.
Yeah. There's some scale there, and you get some values of scale. In your business, you can appreciate that.
Yeah, definitely. So you're also, and how we kind of originally met was being involved with the chamber. You were the treasurer right when I was coming on, I think, or maybe I think Jim Hunley was the treasurer, and then you were the next one after Jim.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about kind of your involvement with the chamber and some of the roles that you've held with them.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've always been my grandfather. I'm Michael Brown III. My grandfather was a banker here in town. He was very involved civically outside of banking. He just kind of leaned in, and that really something he was interested in. And so maybe I inherited a little bit from him, but being involved in the community, I think number one, from a business standpoint, it helps you get out and about and meet people, which I guess does have some benefits from a business standpoint, but I don't really look at it that way. I think if you're going to be a member of the community and you're going to do business in the community and raise your family in the community and benefit from the community, you want to make the community as great a community as possible.
Absolutely.
So from that, I've kind of leaned in. I really enjoy some of my public service. I was on the Cape Fear Public Utility Authority Board for 9 years. That was that was a really rewarding experience, challenging at times as we had to overcome certain obstacles, and then was honored to be asked to be part of the chamber board. So joined the chamber board probably 6 or 7, I guess about 5 or 6 years ago now. Kind of all runs together. I've loved working for the chamber. I mean, Natalie English, who you know well, is a super dynamic leader. I think one of the best leaders I know in terms of her ability to create ambitious goals, but also come up with a strategy to achieve those goals. I think she is very well suited in that regard.
Absolutely.
So it's been great working there, and of course you're working on the board side. Of course, staff does most of the work, and they deserve all the credit. But the board side, you're working with smart folks from different industries who bring a lot to the table, different perspectives, and meet people like you who are great entrepreneurs and growing businesses. So that's been really rewarding as well. Yeah.
So you mentioned you were on the Cape Fear Public Utility Board as well. What and at the last board meeting that we have, there was some discussion around that, and you were spouting off all sorts of stuff, and I was like, holy smokes.
Yeah, it was really interesting experience. So like when I first moved back to town in 2008, about 2 or 3 years before that, the city had their own utility system and the county had their own utility system. And they're kind of operating into two separate entities.
Okay.
Obviously, as the city, I mean, we're a very small county. As the city's grown and taken up more of the county, there's a little bit of overlap there. There's some synergies that could have been achieved by bringing the two organizations together as one public utility authority, but also maintenance of public water and sewer infrastructure, pipes that are under the ground. It's not super sexy, for lack of a better adjective. I mean, you're spending millions of dollars and literally burying it under the ground in pipes or in pump stations, right? It's not like a big, beautiful bridge or a park. But anyhow, some of this infrastructure had aged, and the city and the county each had some pretty notable sewer spills. The Northeast Interceptor broke and spilled a couple million gallons of sewage into Hewitt's Creek about the week before 4th of July back in I think 2006.
Oh no.
So they had an aging system that needed some serious work. The state had come in at that point and put them under a consent decree, meaning like if y'all don't get your act together, we're happy to step in and start running your utility for you. And the county and the city, realizing that they had some synergies if they consolidated the two systems, but also they had some work to do, created the Cape Fear Public Utility Authority. I think it was formed in 2008. Okay. I came on the board in 2009 or 10, so shortly thereafter. But given that they had they came together and they had a lot of work to do. I mean, to fund that work, they had to raise rates, right? I mean, there's only one way to pay for this work is to, issue bonds and finance it, and to pay the financing costs, you got to get the water and sewer revenue. So they were raising rates. We had historically low water and sewer rates compared to what water and sewer costs elsewhere in the country.
Yep.
And we were raising rates, but on a local basis, people, when their rates were going up 3, 4, 5% a year, they weren't, they didn't like that.
Right.
There was a lot of misunderstanding of where that money's going. And
Right.
I used to always say, well, if you don't want your rates to raise, just let us know how much sewer is acceptable to go into the waterways. And I think that answer is 0.
Yeah.
So if we're going to fix this infrastructure, we got to pay for it.
Yeah.
And so that was a really rewarding experience as we kind of started to fix infrastructure, to improve it. We were fortunate to do it in a really low interest rate environment. So we got,
Right.
I think CFPUA was very much a beneficiary of that. They were very focused on it. They got out of the consent decree, and they really created this utility that's running at a very high standard. I think one of the better utilities in the country. And so that was really rewarding watching all that happen. I didn't know anything about water and sewer.
Yeah.
You've got a staff of 200 folks over there who are great at what they do. Some true professionals over there in terms of their knowledge, about all the chemistry and science that goes into treating sewage and treating water. So I thought that's just a really fun experience. Towards the tail end of that, I happened to be the chairman. It was like 2 years before I rolled off the board, and GenX happened. And
You
that
were
was
the
another.
chair at
I
the
was the
time?
chair during that. So that was another interesting experience. I remember the call. It was Memorial Day weekend. I got a call about, there's this article coming out. They found this scientist up at NC State has found this stuff in the water called PFAS,
Mm-hmm.
and apparently he's heard about some cases in West Virginia where this has caused some harm, and there's going to be an article about it, but we don't know much about it, right?
Right.
It was just an unregulated compound, meaning the EPA and DEQ at the state, first of all, they didn't tell us it was in the water, but number two, they don't know much about it. It's not like lead, where we know what the standard is. We know you can't have lead in your water, and you need to test at this standard. We didn't have a standard for it.
Right.
So the article went out to 220,000 people here in New York County. There was a lot of fear initially, and a lot of lack of
Rightfully
understanding.
so, I guess.
Rightfully so, absolutely, rightfully so. Anybody's concerned about something that's potentially harmful, much less you don't know how harmful it may or may not be. And so we, initial reaction, this was just after Flint, Michigan, keep in mind, which was a utility
Yep.
up in Michigan, where
Yep.
they had lead in the water, which was a known, bad carcinogen. And they, I think, failed to disclose that to their community. So the initial reaction was that we knew it was in the water, we knew it was bad, and we hadn't done anything about it.
Right.
Well, we really didn't know it was in the water. We didn't know it was bad, and it's not a regulated compound. The state didn't know it was bad. The EPA didn't really know how bad it was. So we were all kind of on that learning curve. So the initial reaction was kind of attacking CFPUA as if we were, part of this conspiracy to not tell the public what was in the water. We were all drinking the water. Me, my wife, my kids were all drinking the water. So after we kind of turned the corner and educated ourselves and the public about, here's what it is, here's how it got in the water. It came from this company, Chemours, or these other folks that discharge up the river. Got DEQ and EPA involved, and they started looking into it. We kind of turned the corner and started focusing on the real problem, or the real question at hand: what's in there? How do we get it out of the water? And then what are, fast forward to, that was back in 2017. Now we're in 2025. Now you're talking about regulatory standards, et cetera. So we've advanced a long ways, and it's really in the mainstream. I was watching a Senate hearing the other day. They were talking about PFAS. It's in the mainstream discussion now as an environmental issue. But we addressed it. We funded the upgrade of our Sweeney water plant to put in GAC filters to help remove it, and we've I think, somewhat mitigated and solved the problem. And of course, I've been off the board for 5 years, so I don't know what they've been doing since then, but they've been continuing to advance the ball. But that was an interesting experience.
Oh my gosh, talk about an opportunity to learn a lot in many different ways. And real quick.
I came back from Memorial Day. I didn't go back to my office for literally 3 weeks. I was over at CFPUA every day trying to work
Holy
through whatever
smokes.
the issue at hand was that day.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it goes to show you, when at least in my experience, what I've seen is, when you serve on a board, it's not like you just show up for a meeting for an hour once a month and say hi to people and like shake hands. It's work.
It's work, yeah.
It's real, and especially when you're, getting into the executive part of it, treasurer, chair, vice chair, all that stuff. It's real work.
Yeah, if you want to be a valuable board member, you need to show up to the meetings, obviously, and that's time. But you also, if you're going to really add value, you've got to spend some time outside just the meetings, doing your part and being informed.
Yeah, definitely. So what is, our drinking water now? I mean, in my very low level of knowledge and ignorance, but from what I understand, I mean, a lot of the issues have been remediated, and we're at a pretty darn good spot now. Or do you know?
Yeah, and I'm not a scientist or a toxicologist, but I think generally that is definitely the right answer. We are in a good spot. I mean, before GenX even became an issue or was brought to the forefront as being an issue, the city of Wilmington initiated. We get most of our water in Navarre County from the Sweeney Water Plant, which is just on the north side of Wilmington.
Okay.
Just on the northern side of Martin Luther King and that bridge right there, Isabel Holmes Bridge.
Yes.
And that's the predominant source of water here. We also have a groundwater system called the Richardson Plant, which is up in Ogden, where they pull water out of wells and they treat it and then distribute it into the system. So that's basically the two sources of water. There are a few other wells elsewhere, but that's basically the two main sources. The Sweeney Water Plant, which has been in existence for, I think, over 100 years now. Mm-hmm. City of Wilmington initiated a project to upgrade it about the time CFPUA was coming online. So we were just kind of completing that project. And that upgrade, this was before GenX, that upgrade upgraded to a state-of-the-art system. I mean, one of the best, put it in car terms, it was not a Ford Taurus, it was really a Cadillac system. Yeah. I think it was a $65 million upgrade at the time, if I'm remembering correctly. And so we already had a great system. And when GenX happened, we were able to build off of that, existing infrastructure and basically change the media and some of the tanks, not to get too specific, but there's some tanks in there that receive water and settle and filter themselves. So we were able to upgrade some of the infrastructure to add some additional, basically, filters, GAC, a different compound that will pull the PFAS out of the water. So it just basically was an upgrade to an existing system, but that was an expensive upgrade. I think it was, I can't remember, it's been so long, but tens of millions of dollars. So now our Sweeney Water Treatment Plant, I think, would be in the top 1 or 2% in the country in terms of how good of a system it is. It's a great system. Yep. And meanwhile, the Richardson Plant, which is over in Ogden, had just been built, and I think we finished that maybe in 2010. But it's a great state-of-the-art system as well.
Well, I really didn't expect to talk about water
and
stuff, but
it's so exciting. Water is
I know, right? But it's really interesting, and it's it's something that has always been a topic for discussion.
Yeah, well, it's one of those things that clean water.
Who doesn't want?
If you look at the world population, there's a noticeable, major percentage of the world doesn't have access to clean water.
I know.
And that's kind of the beginning of, if you don't have clean water, well, you got bad health, you got bad diets, you got infection, etc. I mean, so we're fortunate in America to have clean water.
We're so fortunate.
And it's almost an expectation, right?
Yeah.
But when the faucet quits, you don't think about it until the faucet quits running, and then it's a major issue. Yeah.
So back onto some of the development stuff. Let's talk about Project Grace, and I'd love to hear kind of the history of how this project has come to be, and let's start there, and then I've got some more questions.
So to go back kind of one step, kind of give you the entry into how we got to Project Grace. The Navarre County was in the old market. Their Navarre County Government Complex was the old Marketplace Mall, which was built in the 1980s over there off of North College Road. Yes. They were on a 15-acre site. They were in this 130,000 square foot old shopping center building, which they basically had turned into, the different department stores became the planning department and the manager's office and stormwater and all that good stuff.
Right.
HR, each of them had a department store, if you will.
Yeah.
They'd renovated it, but that's basically what they had. But they were in a large building, all on one floor, all built in 1980s. Not a super efficient layout, to get from the planning department to, let's say, the stormwater department. You might have to walk, out into what used to be the concourse in the mall and walk, 200 yards that way and go in another door and down a hall and around the corner and finally get there. Yeah. It was under one roof. It was built in an old metal building, basically, one-story shopping center building. You had God knows how many HVAC systems they had out there, little, 2 and 3 and 5 and 6 ton units. So it's just inefficient. But also, since it had been built as a mall, they owned a parking lot that would accommodate a mall. 700-800 parking spots.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, they only need to run the county government probably, 300 or 400. So there was a plethora of parking and space. And so they came out with an RFQ, which we responded to. We were interested in it, and some other companies did, and we were fortunate enough to win to redevelop that site. So they needed a newer, more modern government center. They needed a newer 911 center, and they needed a emergency operations center. This is right after Florence. The old emergency operations center was about a 6,000 foot bolt-on that had been built 10 or 15 years ago beside the mall. And that's a hardened structure, meaning during a hurricane, the staff can be in there working and be safe from a category 3-4 storm.
Yep.
And it worked all the way through Florence. It worked. But during Florence, everybody that's in that hardened structure is happy and healthy and protected with redundancy. But if the county's in emergency mode during a hurricane, they have to have you have different shifts. So you have a shift that's working, and then you have a shift that's sleeping.
Right.
And then they trade off. So that shift was kind of spread out through the old mall. There's some vulnerabilities there. That old mall structure was not built for category 3-4 hurricanes. Didn't have the redundancy in terms of generators and that type of thing. So they wanted a new emergency operations center that was big enough and hardened structure, meaning like resilient to storms, that they could operate in and be more efficient. And they also wanted to use their property more efficiently. So the whole idea there was we built the new 130,000 foot government center. One wing of it, which is the 2-story wing, if you're over there, is a gathering area, cafeteria, or I guess it'd be where folks go and eat lunch, et cetera, a gathering area, a common area. And then off of that is a new 911 center and emergency operations center. That wing of the building is a hardened structure, redundant, 2 generators, a lot of duplicate systems in case one goes down. It's state of the art and a great system. And then bolted onto that is the office tower, which is a tilt-up concrete building, which, by its nature is much more robust than an old shopping center. We were able to reorganize the departments, et cetera, to get them, get rid of core space, meaning common lobbies and hallways that wasted space, but you still had to heat them, cool them, and clean them, and make it a more efficient building and basically deliver a more efficient customer experience. So we were able to deliver that. And then the second part of that project was, since you're going vertical with that building, instead of a 130,000 foot single story building, you've gone vertical. It created a lot of space for additional development, and also we were able to right size the parking, and that created some additional space. So now we're getting ready to go into phase 2, which would be the private side. We're going to buy the second piece of property from the county, and we have to create a certain amount of tax space and develop that to put tax space back on the rolls, and that helps kind of pay for the building that was built. And so we'd gone through that process with the county back in 2020, 21, 22, and the way we did it is we managed the construction of the county government center building, but it was owned and financed by the county at their rates, and they can borrow cheaper than any developer can. So that was an efficient structure, and then we're buying the other half. Meanwhile, Project Grace RFQ had come out, which is the redevelopment of the entire city block downtown. And we did not respond to that RFQ actually. Another developer had won that RFQ. They had worked through several iterations to build a new museum and library for the county. The way they were approaching it was that They were going to build the building and lease it back to the county. And just the economics of that didn't pass muster with the local government commission, who had to approve the long-term lease agreement. And at that point, it had been several years, been through several iterations, and that developer politely bowed out and said, if we're going to have to change the structure, we're probably not interested in pursuing it, which was fine. And when that came along, and the project kind of at that time, this is back in 2020, early 2023, the project was kind of dead. But we had just, we were finishing the government center. We're like, I think we've enjoyed working with the county, with a great county staff. It's been a good project. The arrangement we had at the government center seems to work. We put together a good team. Like, would you mind if we look at Project Grace and tell you what we think? And they said, sure. And so we looked at it, and we did some research for a couple months, and then we came back to the county commissioners and said, we'd be interested in pursuing this. And we kind of laid out the steps on how we'd want to pursue it. And that's ended up how we became involved in Project Grace. So it's basically a different project, but kind of using the same lessons learned from the government center.
Yeah.
In terms of a way to approach it.
What's cool about that is, and just drawing a parallel with with our business, is that the best form of marketing, or like the best form of like building your brand, is just like doing a good job for your clients.
Right.
And that's kind of like what I understand is you guys had one project, did a good job with it, and next thing you know, there's another opportunity that follows, right? That's pretty cool.
And to our county government's credit, we have a great county staff, and I'm not just saying that because we've done 2 projects with them, but they really are business minded and like practical in their approach, and they work together. Smart folks, including the elected leadership, they're all kind of organized and going in the same direction, and are there's some local governments you go with a problem and they're trying to find another problem to, they're not a problem solver, whereas the county has a very problem-solving oriented, practical approach. So they're all about being creative and trying to find the best solution. So I think we are fortunate in that regard, and that made it easier to work with them. They're
definitely
kind of part of the team.
What were some of the, when you guys were, getting started with this project, what were some of the political, what you can talk about, what were some of the dynamics that, from a political perspective that you guys had to overcome, and who were some of the organizations that kind of helped, help you guys overcome some of the...
So before our involvement, it had gone through several iterations. You have a lot of stakeholders. You have the developer who's designing it. You have their design staff. You have the county library staff who was going to be an occupant in the building. You also have the museum staff. So that, between all those folks, you have a lot of different folks in the room, a lot of cooks in the kitchen, so to speak. And you start with one design, and with that many stakeholders, it kind of can start to evolve and take on a life of its own. So there was a little bit of scope creep in terms of the design, and some different things got added and really not fully vetted out, in our opinion, that needed to kind of be reined in and figured out and kind of getting better organized. So that was one step. As we kind of came in, we looked at it with a fresh set of eyes and said, hey, why did y'all do this and why not do that? And we asked a lot of those questions, had a lot of conversations with the county, and got it a little bit better organized, kind of trimmed down the scope a little bit. I think we pulled about $2.7 million worth of stuff out of it. So that was one piece, was the budget had kind of crept over time, and that was one of the reasons it died. But really the real reason I think it failed originally was that any local municipality who's going to borrow money or enter into a long-term lease agreement with a private entity must get it approved by the local government commission. So the local government commission was created right after the Great Depression. There had been local municipalities that had gotten in some trouble, financially. A few of them had become insolvent, and so the state had set up. All municipalities are created by the state legislature, right? That's where they get their jurisdiction. So the state had created this local government commission, which basically is a staff at the local commission that looks at bond issuances and leases and analyzes them, looks at audits, financial audits from different cities and municipalities to make sure they're doing the right things. But they also look at long-term lease obligations and and they had looked at it, and I think their feedback was, we're not really comfortable with this because the county could borrow money. Let's just say it was a $70 million project. If a private developer is going to build a $70 million project, finance it at their borrowing capacity and rates, and then lease it back to the county, there's, the spread on the financing and the spread on, a little markup on the lease.
The profitability.
Adds a little bit of occupancy costs for the county. And I think the LGC correctly ascertained that, y'all have a great borrowing capacity because we have great credit here in New Hanover County. Why don't you borrow the money, New Hanover County, and build the building? And we think that will lower your costs. So our approach really was trying to, number one, get the scope right and get it competitively bid so we can get the actual scope of work that needs to be built at the lowest possible cost, but also the county owns that building and is financing that building, so it's also being financed at a lower cost. So that the two pieces combined cut out a great deal of annual costs for the county and made it far more efficient. You had asked the question, I kind of digressed there, but about the politics of it. I mean, anything in my experience, just my world, just kind of my view of things, but change is big change or even small changes are kind of hard for some people to, people don't like change, right?
No.
It's like some people just are uncomfortable with change. Some people love change.
Yep.
And when the county said we're going to rebuild, build a new museum and library, move out of the old museum and library, move out of the old library, keep the old museum for kind of back office storing collections and research, but basically create this new facility. I mean, there was a fair amount of constituents out there that said, well, we don't need to do that. We don't need to spend money on that. We love the old library. Let's keep the old library, and everything in between.
Right.
I think the predominant, and of course those people that are vocal about that, I think are probably the minority of the population in New Hanover County, but they're very vocal because they're upset about it.
Yep.
Whereas the other, 90% of folks who are just going about their daily business, like I said, that sounds great. They're not out there talking to the media and stirring up things on Facebook. So there was a little bit of that going on, and there's also some lack of communication. I mean, with the folks that are upset about it, we need to go engage with them and speak to them.
Yeah.
And figure out what their concerns are, because some of their concerns might not be well founded. You just, if you have a concern, I explain, well, I think you got that wrong. Here's what we're actually doing, and they get comfortable with it. And then some of them, maybe you can't solve their concern completely, but you can solve it and mediate it a little bit. But just having a conversation with them, make sure they're felt heard, and working through that, I think it's greatly appreciated. I mean, there was a Save Our Library group led by Diana Hill, who was adamantly opposed to us abandoning the old library, which is an old belt department store, and was inefficient. She thought we should, that group thought we should renovate that. And we had to go through, we engaged with them, we talked about why it made sense to move to a new building that was purpose-built for a library and museum versus renovating once more a 95,000 foot old belt department store that didn't have natural light, et cetera. The reason we couldn't renovate it was because of different code and structural concerns. You couldn't put a lot of openings in the exterior of the building to create glass and natural light. There was just some systems issues that just didn't make it financially feasible to do that. And the new building was, we looked at that, but the new building was really where we ended up. But engaging with Diana Hill, Diana Hill never came around to being a full supporter of Project Grace, but she did become a good friend of mine. I mean, we text with each other often. She's a smart lady. She's very engaged. She has the best of intentions of doing what she thinks right for the community, and she's a good debater. We'll get together and talk through different issues, and I'll have one perspective, she'll have a different perspective, but we shake hands at the end and move on. So I've grown to really respect her, and
that's awesome.
Hopefully she'll be happy with Project Grace when it's done.
Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, I mean, it just goes to show you, just when it comes down to it, just being able to communicate and have a conversation with people. And that's what in our world, it's so easy to get on social media and like,
oh, it's anonymous, right?
and just blast and stuff. And it's like, well, let's actually just get together and talk. And
right, we all live here.
Yeah,
right?
we're all people. Like,
yeah,
like we all just want the best, and let's have a conversation. And
yeah, it's like everybody comes at a problem, whether it's politics or anything. Like they're coming at it. I mean, there are a few people that are out there really to stir things up, but they're real outliers. Most of the debate, politics or whatever it might be, people are just coming at it from their perspective and their life experience, and they're coming at it, with best of intentions. But yeah, now the debate in America has become so contentious. Like, if you don't agree with me, Chris, you're an idiot.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm gonna slam you, and
exactly.
You should go to jail.
Yeah.
When really it's like, well, we can debate the issue. We may come to some sort of compromise or agreement. Iron sharpens iron. You might inform my opinion, or I might inform your opinion. We come with better opinions. But at the end of the day, if we still are adamantly opposed when we're done talking, then like we can still shake hands. Like, it's not like, it shouldn't be so personal. Yeah. So it's kind of a lost art form, like true discourse and debate.
True long form discourse and discussion.
Yeah, I mean that's what the idea of the Congress, two sides of the Congress and the Senate and different opposing viewpoints. That's what the founding fathers did.
Exactly, for like days.
For days on end.
Yeah. There's some smart dudes as well. I mean, when you think about the foresight they had to set up.
Right, and they, like they didn't argue and have duels, right?
Oh my, like legit duels. Oh man!
But it was over honor, right? Yeah.
What were some of the organizations that kind of helped kind of get through, some of the local organizations that helped kind of push for Project Grace and kind of help get it across the finish line?
So when we came on, one of the first things we want to do is kind of understand, does the community really want this? Is the majority of the community really want this? Is this something that in every county, you'll never get 100% of everybody to want it, but like. Right. Is the vast majority behind this? Is this something we should do?
Yep.
And so, we engaged with Save Our Library, who did not want it built.
Yep.
But we also engaged with, I think I went to 40 or 50 different groups. I mean, I was going to Rotary clubs, Historic Wilmington Foundation, WDI, I spoke, just at different groups and going, we'd offer to come. There are a lot of people that have lunch, Rotary clubs and other folks in town. I'll come speak. You need a speaker. I'll come tell you a little bit about Project Grace. You can give me your feedback and I'll, take that back to the planning process. So we did a lot of engagement and that helped. But no more that helped educate the public on what actually was happening, why it was happening, and what we thought the merits of the project were and why it was a good thing for Navarre County. But also allowed, folks out there that had different perspectives to say, well, what about this? Why don't you try this instead of that? Or, challenge you. And that also has value because you can bring some of that back and improve the project. So that was a big piece of it. WDI, Wilmington Downtown Inc., which has been the organization that's really spearheaded the revitalization of downtown since the 1970s, and it really deserves a lot of credit for what's happened in our downtown, which I think is thriving now, and that was not always the case. They were very instrumental and very supportive. The chamber was supportive, and a lot of different, most groups in town, I think, who saw the big picture just thought it would be a good thing. So we had a lot of support, and the county had a lot of support. It's really the county's project at the end of the day. But it was really, you need to educate the public and have that conversation.
When is it expected that it'll be, grand opening or like opening for the first time?
The building will, what I'm gonna call the base building. The building that we're responsible for will deliver this September, right? Early September. Awesome. So the library, and with that delivery, will be the library upfit, if you will, put it in office terms. All the pieces and parts for the library. So the library will be able to basically move in September, or they'll probably start moving in August, but by September, I think by early October they'll actually be open. But move the furniture in, get the computers set up, get the books moved over, and actually start to operate. The delivery component for the museum, which is about half of the building, is we're delivering. And I'm oversimplifying this, but somewhat shelf space. So, what occupies a museum, it's not office furniture and desks and chairs, it's exhibits. And as part of the construction of the project, we're not exhibit designers. Monteith Construction is building it, doesn't build intricate exhibits. Exhibit designer does that. So we're delivering the space, and we're going to put in certain infrastructure to feed those exhibits, electrical connections and conduits, et cetera. But then the county, outside of our involvement, is or directly, not through us, is engaged with Lucy Design, which is an exhibit designer. They're experts in designing museum exhibitry, and then a fabricator. And so that design will actually, those folks, we'll turn it over, and those folks, and we're going to kind of be there with them, helping them with the connections, et cetera. But that group will come in and actually construct and install the exhibits, which will take a little bit of time. It's very intricate work.
Yeah.
And so that component, and the museum probably won't open for another, I don't know when the museum opens. I should know that off the top of my head, but next spring, basically.
Okay. Cool. So we're in terms of big construction projects,
it'll happen quickly.
Yeah, it's happening. It's soon.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
18 months flies by.
Yeah. We worked on this thing for 18 months, and
it just takes time.
It takes time, and and then like you said, the upfits. Like we just moved in, and it's like, there's so many little projects within the big project. It takes time.
And the devil is in the details, right? You can look at a project on paper and say, that's exactly what I want. But then once you walk into this office building that we're in, and you start to experience it, you're like, now that I'm sitting in it, I need some things changed, or I didn't think about that. And so that's really where I'd say like 5-10% of the work's really once you start living in it.
Yeah, exactly. I'm experiencing that for sure. So we're getting towards the end here, and I think, where I'd like to kind of conclude with is, you're on track to be the chair of the chamber for 2027, is it, I think?
Year after next, yeah.
Okay, yeah, 27, I think, which is kind of crazy to say. But what do you, if you have any thoughts, what do you think are some of the biggest priorities for our community here in Wilmington, and what are some of the things that you think will be really important for the chamber to continue to be a part of?
Yeah, so I think we need to, when I moved back to Wilmington in 2008, I remember, I've told the story a lot, I remember going to, I think it was a power breakfast, and Rosemary DiPaolo, who was the chancellor of the university at the time, UNCW, was speaking, and they were talking, and I think on the panel was Chip Mahan with Live Oak Bank. But they were talking about job growth, and we need more jobs, and this is right after the downturn as well, so we're coming out of a recession.
Yep.
Talking about job growth and a more robust economy, and what can we do, how's education and business come together to do that. And Rosemary DiPaolo, I remember she said that the problem with Wilmington, or the challenge with Wilmington, is that we have the highest educated wait staff in the country.
Yeah,
meaning
I've heard that
the quality of life, anybody who lives in Wilmington loves it, right? This is a great place to live. I think it's the greatest place to live on earth. The quality of life is super high, so high that kids were graduating from UNCW, and in order to stay in Wilmington, they were taking the only job available to them, which was waiting tables. And they were happy to do that rather than go to another market and do whatever their degree had led them to do.
Right.
I think that's changed now.
Definitely has.
Definitely. And a lot of that's the economy rebound, but Wilmington really has matured economically in the last 10, 15 years. We've built a lot of jobs. We've got a lot of great companies who are thriving, and it's really creating it's creating an opportunity for somebody to graduate from UNCW and go get a job and
stay here
and advance and make more money over time and advance their career and have a family, et cetera.
Yep.
So I think that's really good.
That is
super good. I'd take that over the alternative any day. And one of the challenges in Wilmington that you kind of see right now, with that comes some growth, right? And of course, I'm biased because I'm in development, but I honestly believe this. That growth is a good thing, right?
Yeah.
It's not, the big bad developer out there building houses. It's the people that are moving in the houses. And who are those people? Those are the people who work in these companies and are building these companies. And development's kind of just the filling that demand.
Right.
But there's a lot of you hear these folks out there. Wilmington doesn't need to grow anymore. We need to stop growth, et cetera. So I think that's a challenge. I don't think we should take our foot off the pedal. We are, that proverbial roller coaster. We're getting up to
Yeah.
the top here. We've done the hard work. We need to keep our foot on the pedal and to continue to grow this area and I mean economically, for everybody's benefit.
Well, if I can't, I mean,
and take advantage of that momentum.
there's a saying. I mean, if you're not growing, you're dying.
I
Right.
honestly believe
Truly,
that, right?
And growth doesn't mean bigger or more. It's like, how can we do things differently? Like, let's grow like mentally. Let's grow like internally.
it's everything.
It doesn't mean just like we need more and bigger. But yeah, if you're not growing, you're dying. Like,
If you're not growing, you're dying. And nobody wants to
Fact.
live in a dying town.
No.
I mean, there are plenty of examples of that across the country. And a lot of the people who have been part of our growth in terms of moving here came from those places. And they made the conscious decision to do that because we have it going on here. So, I think Wilmington, I mean, there's a lot that comes with growth. You want better education? Well, we need to grow.
Yeah.
It only comes from one place. That's tax base and sales tax and
yeah.
et cetera. Income tax goes to
Yeah.
the state and then comes back for education.
And
You
growth.
want better roads, you got to do that. That comes from taxes. We need to grow. You like Live Oak Amphitheater? You like going to concerts down there?
Yeah.
Well, you need enough critical mass to support that and pay the bills. So, growth is great.
Yep.
Even though it feels at its lowest common denominator, it feels like, I don't like traffic. Well, you're either going to have traffic or you're going to be a dying town. You'd rather not be a dying town.
Yeah, and there's so
Not
many.
that there aren't challenges we don't need.
Yeah, well,
Not
that's
that
what I was
traffic isn't horrible. I get it.
Yeah.
But there are
That's-
trade-offs in life.
And there's so many stakeholders, and at the end of the day, like you're never ever going to make everybody happy.
No.
It's not possible, right? But if we're growing and doing things for the right reason, and this goes across, business and life and economic development, if you're growing and doing things for the right reason with and getting the right people to the table and getting not always a consensus, but that's just how it
That's
goes.
part of life. Yeah.
That's how it goes.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a right way to do it. I'm not saying it's just open the gates.
No,
but
no,
we need to
and that's
be-
not what you're
we
saying.
need to
That's
be
not what I'm-
thinking. I think folks need to think about where Wilmington was, where it is now, and where we want to be,
Heck yeah.
and lean into that
Yeah.
because I think we've got a great thing going.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Mike,
Yeah.
for taking the time and.
And you got a young business, you need to grow it, right? So you need more clients.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we need. We're always looking for good people, and then the clients will come.
Yeah,
Right.
right.
That's the key. But well, hey, thanks again, man, and thanks for everything
Yeah,
that you've done.
thank you. Really appreciate it.
Yep.
I
Absolutely.
love what you're doing.
Thank you. Appreciate it.